So hello everybody and a very warm November welcome to today's CILIP's online learning in association with the CILIP Disability Network as we come together to celebrate Dyslexia Awareness Week Scotland. So my name is Kirsten, I'm Membership Officer for CILIP Scotland. We're also joined by the Head of CILIP, Sean. I'm pointing over here in the office, and our graduate trainee, Leah. So if you need anything throughout, please don't hesitate to send us a direct message in the chat. To get the technical side out the way as speedily as we can so we can get on to the good stuff, I'll simply point out that captions are enabled. You should be able to toggle these on or off depending on your preference using the controls at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you could keep your mics muted for now, we'd appreciate it. Of course, we love to hear your voices, but so that we can hear our wonderful presentation first, if you could keep them muted, that would be fantastic. You're welcome to have your cameras on or off. As you're aware, we are recording, but it's in speaker mode, so you won't be very visible. It's always lovely to see your faces, but equally, if you're struggling with bandwidth at all, we'd suggest popping the cameras off. And with that, it is such a pleasure to welcome a long-time supporter of CILIP's, Rossie Stone, the creator of the innovative Dekko Technique and of Dekko Comics. So Rossie developed the Dekko Technique from his lived experience, and he has designed it especially with neurodiverse young people in mind, perfectly paralleling our own professional mission here in Scotland's libraries to make learning accessible, meaningful and fun for all. This morning, we will have the chance to learn more and to experiment with the Dekko technique ourselves, discovering how it can unlock imaginative new modes of lifelong learning for library professionals and library users alike. Rossie, thank you so much for joining us. Whenever you're ready, the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Kirsten. And I should say that I'm the one person you can see who isn't actually in the CILIP's office right now, so hence why my background looks different. So in case anyone was wondering. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. As Kirsten was saying, my name is Rossie Stone, and I'm the creator and founder of the company Dekko Comics. Essentially, these colorful looking comics here, and this one is one of our curriculum examples. This one is one of our mental health examples. We basically just turn school information or important things to learn at school or education in general into fun, wacky comic strips that look like something you might see in the Beano. And why do we bother doing that? Why have we been doing that since 2016? I mean, there's a couple of big reasons. First of all, comics as an example are a great form of communicating information. It's been proven, and comics are even being used to communicate highly advanced educational information at college level, like Sheffield Hallam University as an example. And why? Because comics break information down naturally. When you're revising or when you're taking notes in a lecture, teachers, for example, will recommend that as a technique, you break the information down so that it's easier to digest, or you might do that, instinctively. Comics already do that. They break information down first into boxes and then into speech bubbles. They also give you a visual to contextualize the information with, as well as remember each point by, as well as a narrative to string it all together and contextualize it further and map out the information in your mind to refer back to. Suddenly your information has a beginning, middle, and end structure. So there's a lot of value to comics, and we go a bit further with ours. We color code the educational information to separate it from the text. We have colored footnotes. But the second big point of why we do this is we do it to make it fun. Our comics, you'll see when you look at the front cover, it just looks like a bunch of wacky characters running towards the screen. It looks like something you might see on the entertainment market. There's certainly nothing obviously educational about that. And that's the point. We want it to be, we take the approach of, if we're going to make something feel like it's fun and entertaining, go the full hog, make it, young readers can sense watered down fun from a mile off. So if you're going to make a comic, if we're going to make a Beano-like comic that contains maths and English information within the stories, then make it something that could rival or sit alongside the Beano. We use the education in them to make them, I guess what I'm trying to say is the education is like a stimulus within the story. It's what drives the story, but it's not the whole be all and end all of the story or the point of the story. For example, we might have just the characters bantering the information back and forth, but the main reason you're reading the comic is because the characters have a funny dynamic with each other. Or it might be a story about a robot eating garbage until it explodes, but within the story there's some maths that people use to try and stop it from exploding. It's just things like that. Make the education part of the story, but make entertainment the main focus. And by making something entertaining first, education second, it doesn't dumb down the education, certainly not from our experience of doing this for 7 years. It communicates the education through the entertainment. And it's why we have young readers, or at least parents telling us, and librarians and teachers telling us that the young readers using these comics aren't just coming back and saying that they love them and they want more. They're also talking about what they've learned. They're telling them about algebra, about verbs and nouns, about, chemical elements and changes in chemistry. These are the things that you can do through something like a comic. But to reiterate that point about fun, it is so important. It's not to say that education isn't fun in itself. Of course it is, but by using more than just words, you can make things more fun. You can add an extra layer of fun. And why is it important to make things fun? Because so much of the resistance barriers will go down no matter what way you learn, whether you're dyslexic, autistic, have ADHD, or have no issues with learning, conventional learning at all. If you're enjoying yourself, you will throw yourself into it a lot more. If you've got a kid in the playground who's not enjoying this game of football and he can't wait for the bell to go, he's not going to be playing his best game of football. But if he's enjoying it, if he's exciting about it, time will fly by and he'll actually be throwing himself into it a lot more and playing a lot better, a much better game. It's the same when a child picks up a computer game. If they don't enjoy the game, and they're obviously rubbish at the game when they first start because they don't know the controls, they'll put down the controller after an hour or two and probably won't touch it again. But if they're enjoying it, it doesn't matter if they're being beaten by the first boss or struggling to work out the controls. They'll keep playing it, and by the end of the game, they'll be a master at it. They'll know all the controls, all the little secrets of the game, and they'll have taught themselves everything about that game. Why? Because it engaged them, because it was fun. So that's what I want to base this whole talk on. That whole approach that I'm trying to communicate to you now is the Dekko technique. It is not specifically about turning things into comics. That is part of it, but it's just an example. The Dekko technique is all about teaching in ways that use more than just words. Entertainment, boiled down to its bare basics, as far as I interpret it as, is just using more than just words. It's not making it all colorful and wacky and professionally drawn or anything like that. It's just about what are you using other than words to communicate information with. That's what we do, and that's why it sort of evolved naturally, probably not since 2016, probably more like 2017. I've been invited to schools and then eventually to colleges and businesses and so on to teach this way in which I personally go about converting information into other forms of entertainment. And it is not about drawing skill. It is not about professionalism. Again, I reiterate, it is just about using more than just words. So I'm going to show you a video clip from something that I'm very excited to say we've only recently released, which is our Dekko video courses. These are video courses that teach this technique in a lot of different forms to help people learn and understand these techniques and try them out for themselves in really simple ways. I'm just going to show you a clip from that to give you an idea of my story and where I come from and where this technique came from in the first place and what it tries to do. And then I'm actually going to show you some live examples as well. But before I get into that, I just want to ask everyone in this Zoom room, and I want you to ask yourself this question. You don't have to turn on your mic and share the answer, but I just want to ask you this question. Have you ever found a school subject difficult before in your life? All right, and now I want to ask you one more question, which is related. Have you ever found a school subject boring in your life? Everyone will have different answers to that. For you, it might be maths, it might be English, it might be science. You never know, it could even be art. Nobody's perfect. But I was one of these people who I seemed to be good at art. I was good at creative writing. I was good at drama. I was good at all the creative subjects where there was less of a right and wrong answer. You could use your imagination more. But with all those other subjects, maths, English, science, history, you name it, I would have had both my hands up for most difficult and most boring. And you know how it works. Often when you find something difficult, it becomes a chore because it's hard to get into, and therefore you start to see it as something that's boring. There's no fun in it, there's no joy in it. And why did I find all those academic subjects difficult and not the creative ones? Well, they all had something in common. They all were taught, certainly when I was at school, through worksheets, textbooks, copying notes off the board, and listening carefully to the teacher. In other words, you had to be good at processing information through words in order to be good at those subjects, through listening to them or reading them or so on. And I was someone who was just not good at this. I could, be reading a textbook and get to the end of a sentence and realize I don't know what I've just read. I understand the words, but the information hasn't gone in yet. I have to read this again. And sometimes it would be even harder the second or third time trying to read it than it was the first time. I could spend an hour trying to read a 2-page, 2 pages of a novel for my age and still not really know what was going on by the end of it. I have to reiterate that I am now a perfectly capable reader. I have to read emails and contracts for the work I do with my business. I can read a book for fun. It still takes me longer than the average person, but I can do it now, and that's a great achievement. This is not going to be a workshop about how we don't need to be good at words. Of course, we need to be good at words, and there's only things to be gained by getting better at them. But it is one to say that it is a workshop to explore how there are multiple ways of finding your confidence, which is a crucial element, particularly when it comes to neurodiversity, finding your confidence with learning and tackling reading and getting better at reading in words through more than just the conventional way of sit down until it goes in. Because I'm someone who tried the whole sit down until it goes in approach for years on end, and that didn't just not work, it actually caused some real self-esteem issues as well. So this is a way to explore how it's not a rocket science approach. There are multiple creative ways to get better at reading, get better at learning, get better at a school subject you struggle, and how confidence can be one of the biggest issues, and how by enjoying yourself and naturally being engaged with something, that's one of the best places to go looking for confidence, the things that you're good at and enjoy. So without further ado, I'm going to shut up and share my screen. 2 seconds, sharing sound, that is good. And there you go, that's the document we need. So this is a video from my Dekko video courses. Afterwards, I'll reiterate this, but it's all on our website. If you go to our dekkocomics.com website and click on video courses, it will take you to this page. This is the introduction video of it. I'm just going to show you the first half of it, so the first 7 minutes or so. And then we'll return to the talk and I'll actually do some examples of you for what I'm talking about. Kirsten, if there's any issues with the audio at any point, just let me know.
What if a comic could help you with reading? What if a goofy cartoon picture could actually help you remember facts? What if creativity could help you understand a school subject more than a textbook ever could for you? In this video, I'm going to be telling you about the Dekko Technique and how it might be able to help you with your schoolwork and your studying.
So before we begin, can I just ask, have you ever found a school subject difficult before? Or, similar question, have you ever found a school subject boring? Have you ever struggled to read and understand something at the same time, like a textbook question, and is concentration in class sometimes hard for you? If you like, pause the video now and have a think about those questions before continuing. You see, I was someone who found most school subjects difficult, and often because I found them difficult, I would in turn find them painfully boring. Not art, drama, and creative writing, those things were fine and I could use my imagination, but maths, literacy, science, history, geography, and so on, those subjects I would find myself at the bottom of the class because they all had something in common. They were all academic subjects that came in the form of worksheets, textbooks, listening to the teacher, and copying notes off the board. In other words, you had to be good at absorbing information through words to be good at the subjects. I was someone who was not good at absorbing information through words. I mean, don't get me wrong, I could read and write, etc., but I would so often get to the end of a sentence and I would realize, I don't know what I've just read. I mean, I understand the words themselves, but the information hasn't gone into my brain yet. I could spend an hour trying to read 2 pages of a regular novel for my age and still not really know what was going on by the end of those pages. In class, I would constantly drift off into daydreams while trying to listen to the teacher, without meaning to of course, but this kept on happening regardless of which teacher it was. As you can imagine, when so much of school revolved around learning through words, I struggled a lot throughout my primary school years. I started to think that there was something wrong with me, or that I was a duff learner, or, worst of all, that I was stupid. But when I got into secondary school, at the age of 11 my parents took me to get assessed and see what was going on, and, as it turns out, I had a form of dyslexia. To find out that I had been dyslexic this whole time was actually a huge relief, because it turned out that I wasn't stupid, as dyslexia, like neurodiversity in general, has absolutely nothing to do with intelligence. My dyslexia was just a difficulty when it came to processing information. For example, reading words was one thing, but processing and understanding information through them was another. Realizing this about myself wouldn't make schoolwork any easier for me, but thankfully, I had a supportive high school that gave me extra time in exams, taught me how to use mind maps, and also taught me how to use things like the highlighting technique for my study notes. All of this was appreciated, but none of it worked. My mind maps became a mind mess. My highlighted notes just ended up covering most of the text, and I still ran out of time in exams due to struggling to understand the questions properly. So despite all this additional support I was getting, I went through most of my secondary school years still at the bottom of my classes, still getting C's and D's and fails in most of my exams, and still being known as the stupid kid among my peers. Not exactly good for the self-esteem department in the brain. Eventually, in my last year of academic exams, at the age of 17, I decided I'd had enough. If I was going to fail anyway, I decided that I might as well enjoy it. If reading was the main issue, especially during exam revision, which was torturous, how could I make the reading part a bit more enjoyable to do at the very least? After having a think about it, I thought about comics. Comics had never been difficult for me to read. I could read them cover to cover. I could read them several times. I often read them for my own pleasure. You never had to ask me twice to pick up and read a comic. So I thought, what's the worst that can happen? I had one last academic exam to study for, and so rather than just reading the notes over and over again like before, I decided to turn them into comics. I put effort into the drawings, used color coding, and treated it as if it was a Saturday activity. I soon found that these were fun to make, but even more fun to read. I found that the notes were clicking together in my head and felt more natural than it had ever been before. I had a visual, story, and characters now to help me follow, remember, and contextualize the information with. Hey, I knew I was going to fail because no one had told me this was an okay thing to do, and I knew fine well that comics were not considered proper reading. But I didn't care, because for the first time ever, I was feeling good about myself while reading and revising, and I was genuinely having a good time. I had found a way to make exam revision fun. I had found some self-esteem for the way that my brain worked. Oh, and I actually ended up getting a grade A in that exam. This was the first grade A I'd ever gotten in a serious academic exam that wasn't to do with the arts in any way, and all I had done differently for this exam was I had presented the exam revision in a format that made better sense to me and spoke to my strengths. I had used pictures, stories, characters, imaginative stuff that I was always good at, things I liked and things I was skilled at. They had gone from being the distraction in class to being the solution, and the evidence was now right before my eyes, in the form of my grades. So, years later, after graduating from art college, I eventually decided to make my revision technique into a resource that others could use for themselves too. This started in 2016 with Dekko Comics, which turned school curriculum subjects into comics like my revision technique did. But I also spent that time visiting schools and colleges to teach the technique itself to pupils and staff of all ages and learning types. And now, I am teaching it in more depth than ever through a video course format, like the one you're currently watching.
And even though this is just an introductory video, I'm going to show you how you can start using this technique today to help you with your school studies in some very simple ways. But before I do that, I just want to ask you a question. Remember what I asked you back at the start of the video about which school subjects do you find difficult or boring? Well, now I want to ask you something else. What do you enjoy and find easy to get into? For you, that could be a sport, a skill, a hobby, a passion, a game, whatever it is that works for you. But pause the video now and have a think about it, maybe discuss it amongst your peers, and then return to the video for the next step.
So what if you could turn something you do for fun into something that helps you with a difficult or boring task? For example, in my case, how can comics be helpful as a way to learn and remember info from school subjects? Well, they're not for everyone, but they sure do help break wordy information down by their very nature, first into panels and then into speech bubbles. And they give you pictures as well as words to follow and remember it all by, as well as a story to thread it all together. However, for me, the key secret to my revision technique, what I call the Dekko Technique, was actually turning it into entertainment. Making things fun makes it memorable, increases motivation, and helps me understand something through means that I am more confident in. And if thinking how to make it fun is hard for you, then just start by simply thinking, how can I learn this using more than just words? Not every example I teach in the Dekko Technique involves drawing. However, drawing is a very flexible and creative tool to use for it.
So I just wanted to run the video up to this point here because this visual is something I really wanted to focus on. So as I said, I'm going to show you a couple of examples in just a sec, examples that would otherwise be shown in this video, but it'll be better to do them live. But this image here of what the Dekko Technique represents, it again does not represent comics alone. It doesn't represent drawing alone. It's just the name I've dubbed to an approach that lots of people use in their own way, but this is the way I personally go about using it and have honed and crafted, of turning information into all sorts of entertainment. So you can turn it into a sport, you know, whether that's doing the 5 times table while doing keepy uppies, you know, if you've got a young learner who's a big football fan, or do penalty shootouts where the person in goals, you know, you could have the person who's struggling at school can be taking the shots, you can have someone else in goals, and then even if the person scores, they don't get the point for scoring unless they answer the English or science question that the goalie shouts out after scoring. You know, it's about, again, all sorts of ways of using entertainment first, education second. You know, being so bold as to look at it as ruining your education time or your reading time with something entertaining, when actually that's just a fun way of saying it, but it isn't ruining it. It's actually increasing engagement and boosting confidence with that schoolwork or that reading or anything else. So yeah, that is my story in a nutshell. I'll come back to this page towards the end of the talk if you want to know more about the Dekko video courses and what they include. But essentially, yeah, my story is I am a big struggler. I was one of those children who constantly struggled. You could even say at one point I was a demon child. You know, I was really disruptive in my primary school years. Couldn't relate to anyone, couldn't understand why I was at school, seemed to find everything difficult. And yeah, through discovering I had dyslexia, it was actually a big relief and a weight off my shoulders, because it turned out this wasn't to do with intelligence. It turned out my IQ was actually above average for all that's worth. But yet I was still at the bottom of my classes. Got a lot of extra support from my secondary schools, all the conventional support at the time, mind maps, highlighting technique. Didn't end up working because my highlighted notes, as I say, I was just highlighting 90% of the page, because if processing information was my difficulty, how was I supposed to find the key points? Tried really hard, worked 7 days a week in my exam revision, nothing was making a difference. My friends almost by default were getting A's and B's in their work. It actually brought me to tears in my standard grade revision period, not the exam itself, just the revision. I was finding it just so frustrating why I couldn't do this, why this information wasn't going into my head no matter how I looked at it. And eventually in my last year of high school, you know, 17 years old at the time, I had one last academic exam to do and just decided to do things differently. I thought, I've got nothing left to lose. I'll turn it into comics, because I've never, you know, reading's the main issue, but I've never found it difficult to read through a comic. Comics got me into reading in the first place back when I was 7 years old with the Beano annuals. So I just thought, let's give it a go. Simple comics, you saw a clip of them there, just characters bantering the information back and forth, but it was fun to make, even more fun to read. Felt like the information was clicking it together in my head, even though it probably wasn't. And yet I was enjoying it, you know, and it felt like watching an episode of The Simpsons or remembering things that happened from an episode of The Simpsons. So that was good in itself. The fact that I'd gained confidence and self-esteem for myself, and I was feeling good about myself, and I'd found a way to make exam revision fun. That was my victory, but I wasn't expecting that I was actually going to get a grade A for that exam. And all I'd done differently for that exam was I'd presented the same information that everyone else had been given to revise. I presented it in a way that made better sense to me and spoke to my strengths. Remember that question I asked in that video, which you'll see has like pause segments to encourage people to reflect. I found something that I was good at and enjoyed. You know, when a pupil can access things through what they're good at and enjoy, so much capability that you might feel they don't demonstrate when they're in class because they find it too hard, or they don't feel like they're in their natural element, so much of that potential can come to the surface there once they learn that they can and are allowed to access information, including reading and the skill of reading, in other ways. And that is where comics, as an example, do have a lot of value, because comics can be a great gateway into reading, because it can get them over that initial intimidation and boost their confidence with vocabulary and reading words, to the point where when it's time to bite the bullet and actually read a fully wordy paged book, you have the foundations of where you can read and you can enjoy stories to improve and enhance your reading from there, if that makes sense. So it's like comics and graphic novels are a great gateway drug into the world of reading. Speaking from personal experience. So after reiterating all that, I just want to now show you a couple of examples of how simple this can be and how you can start doing this for yourself. I'll show a couple of examples, and then I'll show and I'll do one more example while I give you guys a chance to have a go at this yourself. And don't worry, Kirsten, Sean, and Lee are all going to join in too. They are not escaping this. But just in case anyone, I mean, obviously you're not forced to join in with this. If you do have some paper and pens with you, that is great, because it is a valuable exercise to take part in. But for anyone who's got an innate fear of drawing, which I see in so many adults, particularly in the school world, I have to tell you two things. One, this is not about drawing, and even if you do use drawing for it, it's certainly not about drawing skill. It is about the idea. So no one is marking your work, and also there's no pressure to show your work here on this Zoom call anyway. This is entirely for you to explore. But secondly, just that fear of drawing, where does that come from? Are you someone who fears when you're about to put a pencil to paper, when you're drawing something, you're worried that it's going to look bad and you might look stupid, or you might not look very good at it? I just want to say, like, that's to me a wonderful, not wonderful, you know, but it's an irony in that so many teachers will struggle with dyslexic pupils, or for example, who struggle with schoolwork. And yet dyslexic pupils, as an example, have to go into school every day knowing that they're going to look stupid, knowing that they're going to be standing out for not being able to answer questions correctly or not paying attention in class. You know, that fear is not an excuse for them to not try and you know, get better at anything they struggle with. But it's the same with that so many people have in their attitude towards art and drawing. You know, if you put all the Oxford and Cambridge professors into an art school and said from now on your intelligence was going to be marked on how well you can draw, I think at least half of them would probably have a heart attack. You know, like, it's not just, so I guess what I'm trying to say is, one, I understand that fear, but also please know that, like in an ideal school or an ideal library, I want you to not feel stupid when you're having a go at drawing. No one is looking at your drawing talent. No one is expecting you to draw at a certain standard. This is all about exploring the idea. And just like you wouldn't want a dyslexic pupil to feel stupid or afraid in your library or school, I don't want you to feel stupid by having a go at drawing in this online workshop. So it's a very long roundabout way of saying just that. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen once again onto my graphics tablet. And I'm just going to show the first couple examples, like I say, that are shown in that video. If you've seen that video before this talk, then you might know what these two are going to be. But I will be drawing an extra one afterwards while you guys are working on your own. So I like to use simple examples for this, because at the end of the day, we're exploring the technique for this, and we're not, you know, it's not about trying to fit in as advanced information as you possibly can from the get-go. So start with really simple information, and then that helps you know how to apply it to more complex stuff. So let's say I was learning the 5 times table. Let's say I was in primary 2, I had to learn my 5 times table for my homework, and I really didn't want to, you know, I would want to go and play outside, ride my bike, play with my friends, do anything that was not school related, but you have to do your homework. So how could I make my 5 times table homework into genuine fun so that I'm genuinely having a great time doing it, as well as making it easier for me? Some people would find it really hard to think of something like that. But what I ask myself is the same question I asked in the video. What am I good at, and what do I enjoy? So for me personally, like I say, this could be anything as long as it's using more than just words, but I would think of drawing because I like drawing, and I would think of cartoons. I've always loved drawing cartoons, and I love watching cartoons. So for me personally, my way of turning the 5 times table into something fun would be, it would start by not writing a single number, but simply by just drawing a picture of a cartoon face. There you go. A little SpongeBob-y, cartoony, goofy face. Now, that is already something that I like. You know, it was very quick. If I was doing that for myself, I'd probably spend a lot more time and effort on it, but already I like that. I could have that printed out, hung up on my wall, and I would still look at it because it reminds me of things that I like. Why does a pupil have a Marvel poster up in their room, it's not necessarily because they can draw Marvel, it's because it reminds them of something that they're into. They like Spider-Man and X-Men and all that stuff. So I'd happily have that on my wall. If it was a picture of the 5 times table, I'd probably look away from it or feel like it was a chore to look at it. But what if every time I was looking at this 5 times table picture, I was actually learning the thing I didn't want to do, the 5 times table? Lots of ways you can do that. Here is one very simple way. There you go. I've given him a 5 times tattoo. And essentially, now I've done it in a different color, so it's nice and distinct, but I look at that picture because I enjoy it. But now I can't help but take in the 5 times table information whenever I look at it. So that makes the 5 times table more interesting to look at. And it gives me the benefits of a visual to remember the information with. I can even remember where the 25 is located in the nostril, or the 5 at the tip of his nose. And I'm still looking at that, thinking about the progressiveness of the 5 times table, how it's 5 on top of 5 on top of 5, but it gives me so much more other than words to engage with it and remember it by. And you still have to do your homework. I would still have to look at that picture and look away to see if I remembered it and all, just like I would a sheet of the times tables. But it's so much easier for me to engage with and gives me more than just the numbers or just the words. And you don't have to even draw to use this technique. You can print out a poster of something you really like and get post-it notes and stick facts or numbers or whatever on that. Maybe even do a little game where you take a few post-its off, you see if you can remember what was there and stick them back on. It's all just about using a visual in a constructive way that can help with engagement and memory. So I'm going to show you one more example where this time I'll use a different subject. I'm going to use verbs, because verbs, nouns, and adjectives are a thing that many pupils, when I ask them what do they struggle with in English, they'll usually say this. So I'm going to just do a simple 3-box comic, a comic that is 3 boxes long, not very long at all, and it's going to be about verbs, and it's going to teach what verbs are. And by the end of this comic, I will have made verbs fun to learn about and easy to remember. And if you don't think I can do it, I accept your challenge. But what's more, to show how this technique is absolutely nothing to do with drawing skill or drawing quality, I am going to use stick figures for this comic. And everyone can draw a stick figure. I don't buy the argument that someone can't draw a stick figure. It is a couple of lines and a circle. And so just by using stick figures, not advanced drawing, just 3 boxes long, this comic is going to make verbs fun to remember and easy to learn about. So let's get straight into it. First box here, we'll have a top hat guy, and he'll be talking to his chum, who is a spiky hair guy. And the top hat guy is going to ask the spiky hair guy, oops, it's a bit too bright for me. There we go. What's a verb? And I'll underline verb because that's the whole point of what we're teaching. And I've used color again because I find color, just like color coding in exam revision notes, is just a very helpful way of differentiating. The top hat guy is basically asking spiky hair guy, what's a verb? Now, what should happen in this next panel? I mean, it could be that the spiky hair guy just tells him what a verb is, or gives him an example of a verb being a doing word, or maybe he jumps up and down and says, this is a verb. The point is anything can happen. This is your comic, or if you're showing this to a young person, it's the young person's comic. Anything goes in your story. You have complete creative freedom. But if you want this to be a comic that lasts beyond the exercise, if you want it to be so fun that you happily would read it again in your spare time, or take it with you on holiday, or just be thinking about it next time verbs come along, you probably want to make it something that makes an impression on you, an impact on you. So I would recommend putting things into this comic that are meaningful to you. That could be, if you're really into martial arts, maybe he can teach verbs to using a martial arts move. Or if you're really into a certain kind of animal, maybe, if you're into a certain kind of animal, maybe your favorite animal could come along and do an example of a verb. You know, anything goes. But if it was me, I'd probably inject my sense of humor into it, because, you know, humor is often a great release and escape from anything you find difficult or chore-like. And I have to apologize to all of you sophisticated viewers watching this. You know, I have a very stupid sense of humor. You know, I'm into Looney Tunes kind of stuff, you know, dynamites in the mouth, bonking on the head, you know, childish kind of things like that. So for me personally, no right or wrong answer, but I'd kind of like it if the spiky hair guy, for no particular reason, just kind of booted him into the air 20 feet. Had stars flying around while he does this, and we'll have him shouting, kick, because kick is a verb. It's a doing word, and I've underlined it to show it. So he has shown him what a verb is. He's just given him a very physical example. Now, no need to fear, because we all know that cartoons are invincible. No one's really hurt in the cartoon world. But if you're booted into the air 20 feet, you're going to be a little bit peeved at the very least. So Top Hat Guy is going to come running back from off screen, absolutely drop dead furious. And he's going to have steam coming out of his ears because it's a cartoon. And whilst he chases after Spiky Hair Guy, who's running away laughing because he's a cheeky wee rascal, Top Hat Guy is going to shout after him, you better run. And run, of course, is another verb, another doing word. And with just 3 boxes, you can see how that story could progress if I wanted to make it longer. It's got, you know, it could continue with more Tom and Jerry antics between the two of them, you know, and more funny examples of verbs that can come out of that. But it's a story about the daft characters. That's why people are reading it and what they're doing to each other. And yet the examples of verbs are clear as day and are linked to the story. And even just being 3 boxes long and just containing stick figures, I have given you several other things other than words to learn what verbs are and remember verbs by. I've given you some words, and to be fair, our worksheet would give you more words than that, but I've also given you pictures, story, characters, and memorable moments to remember verbs by. And this exercise captures pupils' imagination. Pupils love running on with this and doing their own stick figure comic about adjectives or nouns or about some other subject, or maybe not stick figures, maybe they put in more effort into it. But the point is that a comic and a picture are just 2 examples of how you can use the Dekko technique. I'm now going to work on an example where I don't use any drawing. I'm going to turn spelling into a word search puzzle next. But in the meantime, over the next 5 or 10 minutes I'm doing this, let's say, let's go for something on the shorter side. Let's say 5 minutes, with 6 minutes if we need it. And I just want you to get your paper and pencils and just not thinking about how good the idea is or anything like that. Just have a go at turning a piece of information. It can be just an example of a verb or a simple sum, you know, 2 + 5 = 7, or, you know, something you know really well, just a small piece of information. I want you to turn it into something that uses more than just words. That can be a picture, a comic, a puzzle, the puzzle being like the game aspect is using more than just words, or into something super relatable, or turning it into a rhyme where it's words, but the rhyme is more than just the words. You know, whatever that means to you, just take a small piece of information and turn it into something that uses more than just words using the paper and pens you have. And I will speak to you again in, let's say, 6 minutes. If anyone's interested in what I've been doing here, I've just made a spelling word search here, and of which, you know, the words I need to spell are naughty, cried, and cream. I just picked 3 words at random, and then obviously the answers are hidden in the word search here. Now, because this is a puzzle, simply looking for the words is like a satisfaction. It's like a form of engagement. It's more than just the words, and it gets me thinking about the words more often in order to find them. Obviously, if you make this for yourself, I'd make it more complicated, and then I would leave it for a day or 2 before going to it if you want it to actually be challenging. But probably what's better is if someone makes a word search for you, and I'm saying for you, like as if you are the young learner, but if someone makes the word search for you and you have to find the words within that word search, and maybe they can make one for you in return. You know, and obviously you can include more spelling words in it as well. It can be a bigger, grander, harder word search, but the puzzle element makes it fun and memorable. And of course, using color whenever you can just adds an extra element of satisfaction. I played around with the idea, which obviously isn't for everyone, but when I was growing up, I was more motivated and incentivized by competition or gaining points. So you could even have a word search dynamic where if you can solve it in 15 minutes, you get 3 points, solve it in 10 minutes, you get 5 points, solve it in 5 minutes, you get 7 points. You know, that's ambitious for a proper word search, but maybe for a little one like the one I just made, it's more doable. But you can collect the amount of points. If you have a series of these, you can have the young person collect a bunch of points in their bank. And when they collect enough, they can maybe get a prize like their favorite chocolate or something like that. Like I say, not for everyone, but it's just an idea of how far you can go with the whole game element and idea. But yeah, I want to stop sharing my screen there, and I'm just going to wrap up quite soon and open this up for questions. But before I do, I just want to conclude on the note of what to do with this from here. I mean, you guys have learned some techniques today. You've learned an approach. This is maybe something that you've been doing already in one form or another, or maybe not, or maybe it's given you more ideas of how you can enhance something you're already doing. It's a very effective technique. It's worked again and again, you know, both inside and outside of Dekko. It's very simple. It just requires the people to feel that they can be creative and giving them the tools to work from. Some people's might feel like it's a great excuse. You know, some people's draw in class when they're not paying attention because, you know, they find that they're craving to draw something or doodle something rather than do the activity. So if this gives them an excuse to draw and be creative in order to tackle the subject, that can be a huge relief for pupils like that. Other pupils, when given this exercise, might not veer towards making a comic or a picture. They might make one of those fortune teller things, you know, and combine their maths with that, you know, turn it into one of those little fortune teller games, or turn it into a paper airplane or something like that. But run this exercise with your pupils, give them a focus, but as much creative freedom to pursue it however they like, and you'll see some amazing results come out. Some pupils will need a bit of encouragement. Like I say, confidence is the biggest issue, not a technical difficulty that comes with neurodiversity. But once they're over that confidence barrier, you'll see some wonderful results. So I just want to share my screen one last time for if you did find this helpful and you really want to give it to pupils in a way that they can implement it and actually have a chance of really ingraining this into the way they learn, and so that they can actually get the same benefit that I got from my exams. You know, I've been doing these workshops and making these resources largely for a younger audience, like ages 9 to 12 or 8 to 14, because I really wanted to give them the technique before they needed it, to learn how to revise and study before their first serious exam or before reading becomes a real issue. So if you want to give that to pupils and give it to them in a way that they can learn it and hone it and put it into practice, then as biased as it sounds, I do recommend these video courses because that is what they were made for. A workshop or a single event can be inspiring and all, but let's face it, life gets in the way the following week and there's not much time to implement it if you've not got a structure to do so. These video courses give you that structure. Each one comes with activity sheets, as well as a curriculum guide. You know, if you go to our website page, dekkocomics.com, I'm sure Kirsten will paste a link in the chat for you as well if you're curious. But if you scroll down, you can see the courses we have available, watch previews of them. We also have the first video for free of each course, and it tells you what each one has and includes as part of their features. You can find the prices here, but it basically works as, you know, the price will vary depending on how many pupils you have in the relevant year groups. And it's as low as 350 for a year's worth of access, and as much as 650. And prices will vary if you're a charity or a different kind of organization. But once you're subscribed, see if I can access that from here. Nope, I have to go back to the main page. But once you're subscribed, your access will look something like this. You know, we have 4 courses, each one ranging from between 4 videos to 6 videos, and each video being between 10 to 20 minutes in length, and each one coming with curriculum guides, more tips, activity sheets. If I click on this course, for example, you'll see that we also have a before and after questionnaire so that you can measure the progress that the pupils have experienced throughout the course. And the 4 courses, just very quickly, one teaches creative learning skills, like I've been giving a quick crash course on today. One teaches about growing confidence with your neurodiversity and acknowledging that, yes, you have struggles, but you also definitely have strengths. One's a CPD course for staff to teach more of these techniques in a teaching capacity in which they are super simple and require little to no drawing at all. And one is about punctuation and grammar, showing how you can actually use this technique specifically for a subject. So that is what videos include. It's all there on our website if you're interested, but I feel I've talked enough now. I would like to open it to questions and also an opportunity to show the work you've been working on during that little exercise period if you want to. But I'm obviously not going to put you on the spot and force you to do that. So yeah, thank you for listening to me, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Amazing. Rossie, thank you so much. It has been such a fun hour and therefore such a memorable hour, and we understand why now. And I will just to encourage anyone who does feel like sharing, this is what now anybody who has been to CILIP's Council will know that I am responsible for drawing up our membership stats, and also through the hashtag Pets of CILIPs. I love dogs more than anything in the world. So I have our kind of top sectors here, and I thought I'll give each one a different dog. So we've got kind of public libraries, school libraries, health, prison, further education and higher education, and they each have a little canine companion to make it more memorable for me. So I think we can very much bring this into our grown-up work as well.
That's fantastic.
Oh, okay. And I gave a wee practice, not quite at your standard of your cartoon guy, but that was a great warm-up too. While people are thinking of their questions, and please do pop things in the chat, everybody, or just raise your hand if you'd like to. Something that struck me, I love that phrase, I think you used at the beginning, that young people, they have no truck with watered down fun. They will sort of let you know if something isn't fun enough. And I wondered, when you were developing the courses or the technique more broadly, do you consult with young people? Do you have a kind of focus group? Do you have sort of young assistants that you can draw on to kind of test new ideas on? Where does that feedback come? Is there a kind of collaboration with the young people themselves?
I mean, I have to say, actually, that's one area that I don't get any consultancy on in terms of like how to make this enjoyable, simply because I'm trained in animation. Like that's what I went off to study. I started this off a passion project in the first instance, even though I did test these comics out in 2015 on multiple schools just to make sure they were working. I think that's the reason, because I tested them out in 2015 and I saw the reactions people were giving my work naturally. I felt confident that I knew my audience and knew kind of what they reacted to, knew the balance between cutting edge, innocent enough fun without it going too far, or being, anything even close to inappropriate, but, bonking on the head and cheeky comments, that's as cutting edge as we went. But the feedback's been consistently good. The fact that people's have been asking for more, and the fact that we've had both neurodiverse and neurotypical learners enjoy them in equal measure and want to use them. So that side of things, I feel I don't need any, I haven't required any sort of like input just to find out what kids are after, because it's not based on what's relevant. It's just based on making something enjoyable and as timeless as I can. They're quite simple stories and quite general in their subject matter. We have a bit of pop culture and thrown in here and there, but at the end of the day, a story is interesting, and making it goofy and wacky leaves for a lot of timeless, funny antics. We more look for consultancy when it comes to making sure it ties in with the school structure. So for example, for these video courses, we piloted them on 20 schools, and I made sure I was speaking to a curriculum expert. I made sure I was, it didn't initially have, questionnaires or curriculum guides in the same way that we do now. I had to make sure that I had all sorts of things that would make it as helpful for teachers as possible. So that side we needed consultancy on, but less so on the making it fun, because from that perspective, I just think about myself. What would I enjoy if I was at that age or struggling with school? What would be accessible to me? So I guess that personal aspect has meant I felt okay with that.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense. And as you mentioned, that kind of, I think this is truly a passion project for you, and a lifelong passion for this comics and creativity. And actually that leads on to another question I had. I can see we've also got one in the chat, so we'll come to that in a second. You mentioned the Beano. I'm wondering kind of what has inspired you, because certainly it's so interesting to have it broken down into what's memorable and why. I remember as a young learner myself being obsessed with horrible histories, and those jokes, those little cartoons, they will stick with you to this day. I know that you mentioned the Beano ones like that. What kind of what was your own inspiration back in the day?
I mean, very much. The Beano was a huge inspiration, and that's why the comics have a very Beano-ish feel. I mean, I also liked, my Disney films, and I liked my sort of like wacky Looney Tunes cartoons and all that stuff. But my inspiration can come from multiple aspects. Some of the Dekko characters are based on characters I made at an earlier stage in my life, or in my childhood, and I might have been inspired by a video game at that point, or inspired by someone I knew in my family. So when you get to the nitty-gritty, the inspirations can come from all over the place. But I would say for Dekko, the main inspiration has been the Beano, the Dandy, and that sort of legacy of simple but very digestible comics.
And very Scottish as well, which is wonderful. Leah, I know that you've popped your question in the chat also about inspiration and the themes. Can I maybe pass over to you to chat with Rossie, and then just if we don't have any more questions, we'll maybe draw ourselves to a close.
Yes, hello, I'm having to mute myself and unmute myself so I don't get a kind of crossover of audio here. But yeah, so well, I guess you've kind of almost answered that question, but I noticed that with some of the kind of science examples, you've got a kind of armored knight, like shining armor type character, and then you had like things like chicks and ducks and all that sort of thing. So I was wondering how you decided like which character went with each theme. Is there a kind of theme within that, or is it just random?
Absolutely. I mean, it's a brilliant question. I mean, essentially, there isn't really, apart from maybe a couple, like Dan's Body Battles, for example, is a comic about this guy who's always ill, and the story mainly focuses around his immune system and the germs they're battling. So they generally tend to be biology. So there's the occasional one like that, but all the others, I very purposefully wanted them to feel like they could fit into any school subject. So that when you had a pupil thinking, oh, I hate maths, oh, but that character's doing it, oh, I love that character, I wanted to make sure all of them could have all kinds of stories in any school subject. And in terms of like how I chose them, it was a big mix. Like I said, some of them are from my childhood. Basil and Ernie, the two sort of Chuckle Brothers-y old men who are sort of at the front of each front cover, they're actually based on the first kind of comic I did for myself in the exam revision technique, back in, I think it was 2009. I just drew those characters because they were fun to draw. And that's why I chose them to be in Dekko, because, that's kind of where it all started. There's some characters who, I wanted to make just to make sure I was relating to a modern audience of young people in one form or another. So, we have about 6 kid characters who we call the Dekko Kids. And yeah, some of them were made just in mind, making sure that I had at least, some diversity in this, and also that I had some young relatability in this. But again, I didn't put in any character that I didn't think I could have a lot of fun with and put into all kinds of scenarios. Most of the characters you'll notice are animals, or robots or something very weird. So you'll see that that's really how my imagination works. I just think of what character could be fun to work with, and I'm less about which boxes does this character tick, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for answering that. I don't think there's any more questions in the chat. So I think it's just after 12 o'clock. So I think it's just time to say a big massive thank you to Rossie from Dekko for coming and speaking to us and sharing all about the Dekko technique. It's been fantastic. On a personal note, I remember doing Number Shark when I was younger because I struggled with maths, and I think that didn't quite manage to achieve what you have been able to achieve with this, which isn't as prescriptive as that was, because that was not a fun experience having to do Number Shark. So thank you very much, and thank you to everyone for coming along. Just a note to say that there will be a recording going about, so feel free to share that with your peers and colleagues, and also there is a feedback form which would be very grateful if you could fill out at some point. It's in the chat below, and I believe it will also be in the roundup email. So just a quick round of applause for Rossie, and thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. And just a final wee cheeky plug from me is that if anyone does decide that they want or they're interested in a license to our video courses, let CILIP Scotland know. And if they relay to me that you're interested, I will give you a special CILIP Scotland discount. So no issues there. And also just FYI, we are going to be releasing these video courses for home use towards the end of this year, which, the ones you've currently seen are for schools, so they're for the classroom environments. but we will be releasing shorter bite-sized ones for home use later. So if you're interested in that, again, get in touch with CILIPs. They can let me know, and I'll make sure there's some lovely juicy discounts for all. But yeah, thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thanks all. Bye bye.